My name is Ronnie Michael, certified public accountant, and this is the Personal Finance Playbook. Improve your finances, improve your life. The title of today's episode is Smashing Tax Myths. Everyone paid a 94% tax rate back in the day. This is the second episode in an ongoing series about common misconceptions about how taxes work. Be sure to check out my first episode where I discuss the problem with, quote, paying your fair share of taxes. One thing I frequently see people misunderstand about income taxes is tax rates. If you're trying to calculate how much in taxes you owe, you cannot simply take your income and multiply it by a single tax rate. In the United States, you are almost always subject to what's called a progressive tax system. Under a progressive tax system, there are tax brackets. As you earn more income, the tax rate on each chunk of income increases. Let's walk through a quick example. For 2025, a single filer with an income of $70,000 will be in the 22% tax bracket when it comes to federal income taxes. This does not mean that you take $70,000 and multiply by 22% to calculate the income tax owed. Instead, you need to apply tax rates for each chunk of income according to the tax law. According to the 2025 tax rates set by the IRS, there are three tax brackets involved for a single filer making $70,000. The first $11,925 of income is taxed at 10%. The next chunk of income, up to $48,475, is taxed at 12%. And then the remaining chunk of income, up to $70,000, is taxed at 22%. When you do all the math, you arrive at an income tax of $10,314. If we divide that amount by the total income of $70,000, we're looking at a tax rate of about 15%. So even though this person is in the 22% tax bracket, he will pay only about 15% in taxes. Another frequent misconception I see when it comes to tax rates is the appeal to historical tax rates. In the ongoing debate about what it means to pay your quote fair share of taxes, some people will point out that tax rates were over 90% at certain points in the past. And this is technically true. From the mid 1940s to the early 1960s, the highest tax rates were in excess of 90%. The highest tax rate ever was in 1944 and 1945 at a whopping 94%. So you already know that people were not paying a 94% tax on their entire income, but they were probably paying that 94% tax rate on a decent chunk of income, though, right? Well, not exactly. In 1944, the 94% tax rate was on any income in excess of $200,000. Adjusted for inflation, $200,000 back then is the equivalent of about $3.7 million today. How many people do you know making over $3.7 million in income per year? In reality, virtually no one back then paid a 94% tax rate on any chunk of income. These historically high tax rates basically never came into play for anyone, let alone the average American. And this analysis is without considering things like exemptions, deductions, and credits that would lower the amount of tax actually paid. So there you have it. We have a progressive tax system with tax brackets. You cannot calculate your tax by slapping the tax rate from your tax bracket on the amount of income you earn. And historical tax rates that were greater than 90% never actually came into play for over 99% of Americans. What do you think? Does this apply to your life? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.